Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
The Eight Immortals Restaurant Massacre. The Eight Immortals Restaurant was a Chinese restaurant in the port of Mutya in the Portuguese colony of Macau. The modest eating establishment was connected to the Eight Immortals Hotel. The restaurant was owned and operated by Zheng Lin, a former street hawker who moved his business from a stand into a formal restaurant in the 1960s. He lived nearby his restaurant with his family, who helped him run his business. The restaurant was a financial success, but Zheng and his wife were noted to be heavy gamblers. Huang Chih-heng was born on the Chinese mainland before immigrating to Hong Kong in the 1970s. Huang went by various names during his life, going by Chen Shuliang or Chen Shuliang when in Hong Kong. In 1973, he was involved in a dispute with another man who owed Huang money. The dispute resulted in Huang murdering the other man and fleeing Hong Kong for Guangzhou. While in Guangzhou, Huang burned his fingerprints in an attempt to avoid being linked to the murder. After living in Guangzhou for several years, Huang married the daughter of his landlord. The woman's family disapproved of the marriage, so the couple eloped, fleeing to Macau. Before his second leaving of China, Huang burned off his fingertips to avoid being connected to the murder he had committed in Hong Kong. In Macau, Huang became involved in the local gambling scene, becoming acquainted with the Zhengs in the process. He was around 50 years old at the time. During one evening of gambling in 1984, Huang and Zheng Lin became involved in a series of high-stakes bets against each other. In the end, Huang won 180,000 pataka, or 20,000 USD, from Zheng and his wife. The Zhengs were unable to pay the debt, so a verbal agreement was made that the Zheng family would cede their restaurant's mortgage to Huang if the debt were not repaid within 1 year. Huang agreed. However, even after frequent visits and reminders from Huang, 1 year later the Zhengs had failed to repay their debt. Huang later claimed that not only had the family failed to repay him, they had also continued to lose money to him. In total, he stated that they had owed him 600,000 pataka, or $75,000 USD. The event that led up to the massacre. The Eight Immortals murders took place on the night of August 4th, 1985. 9 members of the Zheng family were busy inside the restaurant, having earlier closed the establishment for the evening. The Zhengs were last seen alive by a delivery truck driver late in the afternoon. In the evening, an angry Huang entered the Eight Immortals restaurant and demanded that the Zhengs pay him 30,000 pataka. He later claimed that he dropped his demand to 20,000 pataka. He grew increasingly agitated when Zheng Lin refused to turn over ownership of the restaurant. Eventually, Huang grew physically aggressive towards the Zhengs, breaking a beer bottle and using the jagged glass that remained as a weapon. He took Zheng Lin's son hostage and forced the other members of the family to bind and gag each other while holding his weapon to the son's neck. Huang later confessed that one family member broke free and started to scream, causing him to stab her in the neck with its weapon. He then proceeded to kill 9 members of the Zheng family, either by strangulation or with a broken bottle. He then briefly left the restaurant to lure one of Zheng's sisters to the restaurant, where he then killed her. He dismembered the bodies over the course of 8 hours and wrapped them in black plastic trash bags, which he then dumped into the ocean or threw into dumpsters. Afterwards, he cleaned the restaurant, recovered some money and a safe from Zheng Lin's corpse, and left the restaurant, choosing instead to stay the night at the Zhengs' nearby residence. The next morning, a delivery truck driver, the same one who had delivered goods to the Zhengs the previous afternoon, found the restaurant locked with a note on the door stating that the restaurant was closed for 3 days. He visited the Zheng family home, where Huang answered the door, telling the delivery man that the Zheng family had left on a trip to the mainland. On August 8th, 1985, a swimmer found 8 pieces of human limbs on a nearby beach. It was originally theorized that a group of illegal immigrants from mainland China had their refugee boat capsized and were torn and eaten by sharks. But on further examination of the limbs, it revealed that precise cuts had been used to sever them. This finding prompted a police investigation and a search for potential missing persons. Over the next few days, forensics determined that the limbs belonged to at least 4 separate people. A further 3 body parts were found on Macau's beaches over the following week. These findings generated significant interest in the press, and several theories were raised as to what had happened. Eventually, the Macau police were able to discover that the severed limbs belonged to the Zheng family, who were reported missing by relatives. In the meantime, Huang had reopened and continued to operate the Eight Immortals Restaurant. This was considered unusual, but not unwarranted, as he was known to associate with the Zheng family and was in possession of the restaurant's ownership documents. He also began collecting rent from the Zheng's family's former home. However, Macau police grew suspicious of Huang's activities and began investigating him. When they searched his bank holdings, they found documents belonging to Zheng Lin and student ID cards belonging to the missing Zheng children. Huang attempted to flee Macau for the Chinese mainland, but he was caught and arrested on the 28th of September, 1986. He was charged with the murder of all 10 members of the Zheng family and was convicted on October 2nd, 1986. Huang's arrest and the revelation that he had been operating a restaurant for months after dismembering the eatery's former owners, as well as reopening the restaurant 3 days after committing the crime, resulted in an urban legend that he had steamed his victims into pork buns. The last body parts traceable to the Eight Immortals murders were found in a trash dump in 1989, 4 years later. The aftermath. Huang was attacked in prison by another inmate the day after his conviction. He was sent to a hospital to convalesce, where he attempted to escape without success. On October 6th, he confessed to the murders and detailed to investigators how he had killed the Zheng family. He attempted suicide twice, the second time fatally on the 4th of December, 1986, by slicing his wrists on a trash can lid. He left a suicide note and a letter to a local newspaper explaining his actions, stating in his note that his suicide was not due to his acceptance of his sins, but rather to escape his chronic asthma. After his death, what was left of his fingerprints linked him to another murder in 1973 in Hong Kong. Whatever was recovered of the Zheng family were later cremated, and the ashes were scattered off the coast of Macau by relatives. The former Eight Immortals Restaurant in 2015. After Huang's arrest, the restaurant was immediately closed and seized by the Macau police. It was resold by early 1987 and has seen different owners in recent years. Today, the former restaurant and the apartments above it are part of Bai Xian Hotel. The legacy of Huang Zhiheng lives on in cinema. The movie entitled The Untold Story, or in Chinese translated simply as Human Pork Dumplings, was directed by Herman Yao. It stars Anthony Wong, Danny Lee, and Emily Kwan. It received such rave reviews that it spawned 2 sequels. The story of the Eight Immortal Restaurant Massacre shows that the hearts of men are more frightening than anything we can care to imagine. That man is capable of the greatest of goods, but also the greatest of evils.